Hi, my name is Nathaniel Lee-Ran, and we're here today on this episode of Upfront with someone that you might be familiar with if you've been following current events in the Okanagan region this summer. Fire Chief Jason Brolund of the West Kelowna Fire Rescue Team. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm just going to dive right into questions. So I think the public understands the scope of the fire that we experienced on both sides of the lake this summer, but how big and how bad was it really?
Yeah, it was, not entirely unexpected. We knew all the conditions were there for us to have a significant fire this summer and particularly those days. But I think the scope of the fire ended up being a lot bigger than we had thought. I think when you see a fire grow as fast as that one did, and you see a fire spread across the lake like that one did, those are pretty unprecedented things in our world.
Yeah, I remember I was here in the early 2000s for the 2003 fire, and I watched that kind of from the lower mission come over the hill towards us. But to see, and this time I was actually living on Knox Mountain, to see it progress like that on the west side, and then to jump, that's something like it was so close for us.
Yeah, it was really pretty unbelievable. I was there in 2003. I was a young firefighter, and me and my crew were in Kettle Valley on the night that the fire came through, and a lot of the things were really similar, like the sounds, the smells, the heat that we felt, the way that it got dark in the middle of the day. Right. These were all like very similar experiences, and just didn't think that it'd ever be in that situation again.
Yeah, for me, never having seen trees crowning sort of on the top of a hill like that, and that was really scary and exciting and everything kind of all at the same time. I was wondering if you would speak a little bit to how firefighting has changed since then. It's like 20 years.
Yeah, I don't know where all the time went. There was a lot of lessons learned from 2003. I think in many ways the fire in 2003 was a model in terms of how to respond to something like that when it hits your community. The things that needed to happen, get people out of the way, preserve life and then property, but also how to communicate with the public. I think the example was set in 2003, and we took those lessons learned, things that went well in 2003 and things that didn't, and we've applied them continuously since. But to be back in a very similar situation where tens of thousands of people are needing to evacuate, and we've got an entire community at risk, it was a big deal, but we benefited. Technology's changed obviously a lot. Our training and equipment is even better than it was then. But I think one of the really big things that struck me was stuff like the webcams and doorbell cams. We didn't have that in 2003. Like when people had to leave their homes, they essentially, had no clue what was going on in them, or very little clue. But this fire, people, had live full motion video from their doorbell cams or from their webcams of what was happening to their house. And in many cases, like, it was really sad and scary. People watched their houses burn in some cases, but in other cases, they were able to talk to the firefighters, and they were giving them words of encouragement through the doorbell cams, saying like, "Hey, good work, thanks for doing this." And we got like a bit of a blooper reel sent to us from a number of different people of the firefighters, taking a moment and shooting basketball in their driveway, or like moving all their furniture away in advance of the fire to try and not have a source of ignition in their yard. So that was very different for us. We got a lot of video of like firefighters and police officers behind the lines, like saving houses, like one at a time with the garden hoses that were left out. And I mean, this is work that was going to happen whether it was on video or not, but it's kind of neat that it was captured and we were able to highlight the work of those teams.
There's a lot more visibility that way, yeah. How is there a difference in the size of the team between the 2003 and the 2023 fires?
I think at the end of the day, they were both very large teams that were put together to protect our communities. I think that the spirit in 2003 was everyone coming together, and it was very much the same thing. I remember in 2003 there was fire departments from all over the province that were here, and same thing this year. I think we had close to 40 different fire departments that came together here. At the height of it, there was over 500 people, including our partners at the Wildfire Service, working on that busiest day. An all-out effort in both cases, but it's great to see that spirit of working together is still there.
Mm-hmm. What was it like for you and your team in the days after that sort of climax time when everybody's still working really hard and they've been working for a long time, but you had sort of overcome the worst of it, hopefully? What was it like then?
Yeah, it was a pretty drawn out event. Obviously the most dramatic firefighting took place kind of in the first 36 hours or so. We brought together a team from all over the place to take care of that. But, the real grind took place in the weeks that followed. And the majority of that work was done by firefighters from the BC Wildfire Service in the hills behind our community, mopping up, cutting guard, doing really dirty, hard work. An amazing team that they have that does that work. And they were able to bring firefighters in from around the globe. There was hundreds of firefighters here from South Africa, for example, who did that really hard, arduous, dirty work after the excitement had passed and it was just hard work left.
I saw a couple of prescribed burns, up. There was one by a park. Do you want to speak a little bit about that? Is that about prevention kind of for the rest of the summer, or?
No, in the case of this fire, the Wildfire Service often uses fire as a tool to put out fire, especially when the fires are as large as this one was. And when it's applied correctly, it can work very well to burn off fuel and basically strangle the fire before it's able to cross a fire guard, for example, and threaten more of the community. So we saw that used in our community a couple times here. It's not a technique that we as a structural fire service use, but that's where the partnerships work so well when we can draw on each other's kind of unique tools to put fires out. But I also know that that's often really concerning for people to see, like, hey, the danger's past, it looks like the fire's out, but all of a sudden there's a fire being lit and it looks like the day that it started. Mm-hmm. And that's a tough one sometimes for the community to understand. But in this case, the burns that they did in the days following the fire were very successful. And one of the primary goals of the incident command team in the later days of the fire was to keep it out of Powers Creek Canyon, and preserve the Glen Rosa neighborhood, and doing those burns was a real key tool to do that.
Did anything surprise you during your overwatch on the fire? You have to speak to anything, I guess.
Yeah, I got surprised every day.
Yeah.
I think from like the first moments of the fire, and being surprised how quickly it came, to later on the kind of the second day, being so worried about the public not making it out. And then being surprised by, we had no missing persons reports, and we were able to verify that everybody did make it out. And that was surprising in a very positive way. Mm-hmm. But then I think just like the ingenuity of firefighters, and the way that firefighters come together, work as a team, and get the job done. I would hear stories every day from the fire line, and some of those surprised me a bit. Like, for example, the one firefighter who sacrificed going to his citizenship ceremony. He was here from a department in the Fraser Valley. And he had done everything over a long period of time to become a Canadian citizen. And he chose to be here helping in our region rather than going to his ceremony. And of course, when the government heard that, they stepped in and said, we can do it from behind the fire lines. And he became a Canadian citizen over Zoom in the fire truck.
Wow.
And then went back to firefighting. So that was a big surprise. But, there's 1,000 stories about this fire, and as we get past it a little bit here, more and more they're starting to be told. The firefighters are talking about it, and sometimes, a lot of it's very surprising.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a lot of sacrifice made by your members with their homes and their families. What was it like for your family during the fire? Speak to that a little.
Yeah, I had a really similar experience to a lot of my firefighters. For the most part, the members of West Kelowna Fire Rescue, we all live in the community. Most of us grew up here. And, we all have families. So, like them, my family got evacuated. And my family had practiced what our emergency plan was going to be, and if this very thing happened, where my wife and daughter were going to go, and what I would do, and never thinking that we'd actually do it, but it ended up that we needed to, and it was difficult, obviously, for them to evacuate, but it was made easier by the fact they had a plan. They knew what they were going to take. They knew where they were going to go. But it was some long days away from them. And, like some of my staff slept on the floor of their office for days and days on end. I was a lucky one to have a hotel room that I shared because I worked the day shift, and the room I was sharing with one of my staff, he worked the night shift. So we would literally pass in the hallway. And it, I think experiencing the same thing as the public did, because the public was doing the same thing, was really helpful because it gave me a reminder every single day of what the public was going through, the same ones we asked to get out of the way. They were having the same challenges. Yeah.
It was tough, staying up till 2, 3 in the morning the night that it jumped the lake, and thinking, I don't know if I'm going to go to work tomorrow, or maybe I'm going to go to work, but then I don't know where I'm going to go after that. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure a lot of people felt that way. What do you think was the most important messaging for the public during that time? And how important is it how you deliver that messaging?
Yeah, I think it was, there was 2 messages, or there is 2 messages. The most important one at the time, we had very little notice. Like, we kind of had about a day, and when I say a day, I mean like the daylight portion of a day. When we knew the fire was burning behind the community, and we knew there was potential and that the weather conditions were aligned, that the fire could grow. And we used that time to get people out of the way and assemble an army of firefighters to fight the fire that night. And that was a really conscious decision on the part of the city manager and the staff at the EOC and us as firefighters to say, how are we going to use this time? And getting that message out to people. I remember in the morning talking to a media outlet, and we had scheduled it the day before, and before I went on, I told them just how important the message was, that we needed to let people know to be ready. They were likely going to have to leave. And we pushed that message hard that day, and people, for the most part, with very few exceptions, complied, and they, packed their things, and they were ready to go. And in many cases, they left before we even needed to ask them. But when we asked, they did go. The neighborhoods were empty. And it helped incredibly in the firefight because we didn't have to worry about getting people out of the way on top of, dealing with the fire. So that was the big message at the time. I think leading up to and even now after, the message is, following the Fire Smart principles can make a difference between losing your home or saving it. And there was obviously homes that just could not be saved. But there was a lot of homes that were saved because people did very simple things, like cleaning out their gutters or replacing a cedar shake roof or moving a wood pile away from their home or, cleaning up around their yard. But there was also homes saved because at the very last moment, firefighters came and did that Fire Smart work. They moved wood piles. A lot of people came home to all of their patio furniture, me included, in their driveway because firefighters had moved it to try and preserve their homes and stop those embers from landing in the patio furniture and then leading to more of a fire. So the second message is just how beneficial Fire Smart is.
I heard from some people, or people that are not from here, from Alberta, that there is a suggestion that you could use your hose and the city water to wet everything down before you leave your place. Is that something that would actually help by the time something happens?
We saw people doing that, but in some cases maybe it would be all about timing, right? Like often we're asking people to leave in advance of the fire, and that may not be as effective. We saw people putting sprinklers on their roofs, and in some cases that may have helped. Really, like what is helpful is right now, people looking around their yard, looking at those Fire Smart principles and saying like, yeah, I'm going to remove this cedar hedge, or I'm going to, change my roofing material, or, all of those principles. That's what's most effective. Standing in your yard while the police are asking you to leave, trying to hose down your house is a pretty last ditch effort. And there's things that can be done now that will prepare you for next wildfire season.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. I'm going to take a little bit of a pivot. What was it like, how do you handle the level of recognition that you kind of now have? You've been in the public eye quite a bit this summer.
You know what? We're so grateful for the outpouring of support from the public. The signs and the cards and the honks and all that kind of thing are really, what keep the firefighters going through some very difficult stuff. Like, obviously this all weighed really heavy on us. So for me, being the chief, I was on the front end of all of that. And not something that I necessarily wanted or I'm entirely comfortable with, but it's part of, being the chief, I think. I also I'm just appreciative of it, and it means a lot to the firefighters to have all those thank yous, and I pass them along as much as I can. But I am looking forward to going back to a quieter time, I think.
Yeah, we're still seeing these big signs near the highway. I drive a truck during my day job, so see big thank you firefighters in a few places still.
Yeah,
nice.
It's very cool to see, and it means a lot.
Yeah. What was it like, kind of in the same vein, speaking at the UN?
Just like everything has been in the last 6 weeks, it was a blur. When the Prime Minister's office contacted me and asked me to come and share our story, it obviously isn't something that you turn down. So to be able to go and tell about the hard work of the firefighters, about all of the partnerships that made it work, about how our community, our world was really turned upside down for those 36 hours. And then make a plea to all of the leaders that were in that room on a very big stage was quite an experience. And so to be able to share the Okanagan story on the world stage, but also tell them that the Okanagan's a very beautiful place, and We just need to really think hard about the effects of climate change, and that first responders can't be first responders to that problem. Like when they're counting on us to deal with the effects of a changing climate and we're the first ones, it's too late. They need to take actions much sooner.
So you told me a little bit before we started that some people actually came from Japan to talk to you as well. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think our story continues to be a big one. I think it's a big story because it's largely about teamwork and relationships and how a community pulls together to come through something like that. And also the fact that like people did listen and there was no deaths, and the loss was horrible, but the saves were also very, very large. So it is a big story, and I continue to get contacted by media from around the world. Earlier this week, there was some media from Japan that came and wanted to know, learn more about our community, about our region, about how we fight fire here, and about what we've been through. And it was very unique. But I always try and share, how beautiful this place is normally as well.
Yeah, I think we get a lot of tourism, more and more from those kind of people coming into Vancouver and wanting to see into the interior of BC. And we're kind of one of those next hubs, so that's really good for us if we can keep everybody safe, right?
Yeah.
Why was the Prime Minister's visit here? Did he visit you here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, why was that important?
I think, having the leader of our country come and want to see with his own eyes so that he can take our experience back and share it with the rest of the country was really important. I think he picked the right time to come after the danger had passed, and but it was he brought great energy, and he shared with us that all of Canada was standing with us, and those are big words to hear, right? It was a boost for our people, and I think it was a boost for the community to have the leader of the country come and spend a few moments with us. It was also a really big boost for my team when the Vancouver Canucks came, and Quinn Hughes and Jim Rutherford joined us, and very much along the same lines, wanting to say thanks and just wanting to boost morale a little bit, and they certainly achieved the same thing.
That's great. I wasn't aware that the Canucks came. That's awesome. Yeah, morale is really, really important. We spoke a little bit about Fire Smart principles, but just kind of to wrap up, how should people prepare for our next season?
Yeah, I think it's so important for people to realize, even though we've had this big fire, it doesn't mean that we're not going to have another fire season next year. So following those Fire Smart principles, the Fire Smart BC website has a ton of information for people to follow. Some of it's very simple things that you can be doing to help protect your home from the next wildfire. And also just talking to your family and having a plan, making sure that you've practiced it. What would you do if you had to be evacuated? And if you were separated, how would you get reunited? I'm so grateful for all of the support and help from the public and from our partners, and for the hard work of the firefighters day in and day out there. But the biggest thing the public can do for us is to do those two things: get fire smart and have a plan.
Okay, yeah, great messages. Thank you to Fire Chief Jason Brolund, all the Okanagan, BC firefighters, and everybody that came to help us this season. This has been Up Front, and my name is Nathaniel Lee-Ran.